I used to call us a re-startup, right? We were a company that had hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and was profitable, and yet we had to behave like we were a startup because we were entering all new parts of the media landscape.
Welcome to Media Voices, everybody. We take a look at everything that's going on in news, media, magazines, everything over the past week. I'm Chris Sutcliffe.
I'm Esther Thorpe.
And I'm Peter Houston. Oh, big news.
You've turned into a goat. So...
Anyway, we're opening pre-orders for Grub Street. The Grub Street Journal will be available to pre-order on Wednesday, March the 1st. Go to grubstreetjournal.com and it'll take you straight to the order page.
Your magazine for people who love magazines.
It's a magazine for people who make magazines as well as love magazines. Yeah.
Actually, Peter, can you tell people what the theme of the first issue is yet?
What kind of idiots still make magazines?
As a thesis statement for the magazine, I think it's pretty solid.
Well, everyone laughs at the question and then nods their head and thinks, yeah, why am I doing this? But then they go on and explain for 20 minutes why they're doing it. That's the beauty of it.
And that extract you just heard is from my interview with Bonnie Kintzer, who is CEO of trusted media brands. That includes brands like FailArmy, Family Handyman, and Reader's Digest. I think, depending on which one of those names you recognise, probably speaks to how old you are.
I'm on FailArmy all the time.
I've never heard of FailArmy.
So we talked about the opportunities she saw to turn around the company when it was facing bankruptcy in 2013, how the business has weathered some of the storms of the past decade, and why she thinks it's vital to focus on where the audiences are regardless of platform algorithms. Which I think probably leads quite nicely into our main story, right?
Well, as Esther said in her intro there, we are going to be talking about platforms here because the spectre of a news platform's payment deal has raised its head yet again. I feel like we spoke about this endlessly last year, dissecting the Australia-type deal, that's what everyone kept calling it, by which platforms like Google and Meta will pay publishers directly for the privilege of including them in search results. So a bill under consideration in Canada is going to require platforms, well, like Google and Meta, to negotiate payments with publishers when they link to their content. The snappily titled Bill C-18, or the Online News Act, is modelled on legislation that passed in Australia in 2021. And in response, and this is why we're talking about this right now, Google, which opposes that, surprisingly, is testing blocking news entirely in a small number of searches, and it's set to be joined by Meta, which is going to do the same as well. So, how enthusiastic are we to talk about this?
And it seems to be an issue that really divides in like media analysts like us. Like you are either firmly in the camp that this is the most stupid idea you've heard on the planet, or you're all for it because news companies get money. And I'm really trying really hard to understand the opposing argument for this. But to me, it's just like Google provides, millions and millions and millions and millions of people. It provides them as traffic to publisher websites. Why should they have to pay for the privilege?
I think that over the course of the past 2 years, we have looked in depth at the arguments of people who are proponents of these deals. And the issue is, even the people, you said there that it divides it, but I think that even some of the people who, like us, are relatively opposed to the foundations of this and the reasons behind it, do recognise that there is a need for funding. Oh, go on, Esther. I can see you psyching yourself up for a big row.
I will say, again, in Google's defence, what they've done through the Google News Initiative, especially, you look at some of the things they've done for local news, and they are putting their money where their mouth is, and they're saying, we don't think this link tax is the right idea, but we are going to fund you to help you make more sustainable business models. And the number of times I've spoken to people and they said, the GNI and the courses have made such a difference.
Peter will get to you because for the benefit of the listener, Peter was making some faces and rolling his eyes quite to the point where I thought his head was going to fall off there.
Okay, I don't disagree with what Esther's saying, or in principle. However, to say that Google is putting real money into the news ecosystem is bullshit. It's basically a PR budget for Google. And, you can look at that a million different ways, and I'm absolutely and I'm not undervaluing Google's news initiative. I'm not undervaluing the money they spend, but it's a PR budget. If you compare it to how much money they make everywhere else. So, to me, that's not the point. The point is this fundamentally misunderstands the nature of the internet.
Mm.
You know, it's distributed content, right? Now, if you want to protect your business model, you're going to have to do stuff that adds value, and it's got to be about paywalls, gated content, it's got to be about registered users, it's got to be about relationships, it's got all sorts of stuff that gets done on the other end, not at the search end. This is a bit like asking ITV to pay Persil because someone buys soap powder, right?
So why then do we think that there is this antipathy among some commentators? We were talking about some individuals before who are, you know, ardent proponents of this or fiercely opposed to it.
Oh, it's Google's not taking any money from us, right?
No.
You could argue that Google is taking money from News Corp and Reach and the bigger publishers, and in Canada and Australia, because they're taking advertising revenue from brands that would used to advertise in those places. I'm not saying
that's
that
bullshit.
I believe
that's
that.
Bullshit. Yeah.
I'm just saying that's the argument that there's.
I mean, I've seen the monopoly argument come up a couple of times, but again, that's being dealt with various legislations in America, and also, I think this is all coming at a time when we just touched on this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. Bing and Google are now looking very, very seriously at zero click searches and using AI to surface those. So it's like, well, and actually, this is where I completely agree with the stance Google is taking here. They're saying, well, if you want us to pay you for this, we're going to take your links off, and the only people that hurts are you.
I mean, we've seen previous tests of this, right? And it was, I think there's a fantastic Wired article which we'll link to, and it sums all this up. There's a fantastic point made in that, which is basically saying Australia was probably the only nation that could try that because of the strength of News Corp out there. Now, elsewhere, if this happens, there's a reputational cost to Google and Meta, potentially, or whoever their successors are when, they no longer hold the dominance in search. Ultimately, fundamentally, in the short term, it's hurting publishers more.
And it's a 5-week trial, but they're making a point, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just saying, okay, well, we'll stop putting news in search for these amount of people for this amount of time, and tell us how you like it.
And I think what was particularly notable about this week is that it's the first time I've seen Justin Trudeau actually made a statement about it, which is quite rare for a leader of that high up to actually basically bother getting involved. And he said that he thought it was a terrible mistake for Google to block news. But it's just one of these. This feels like the wrong thing to be talking to Google about. We need to be talking to Google and Bing and all the others doing all the chatbot AI stuff about how they compensate publishers for the work they're scraping.
That is actually using publishers' resources and publishers' content for something that will directly benefit them, and the platforms in another way. Whereas the link tax, to Peter's point, is just how the internet works.
But also, I feel my soul leave my body every time I start talking about this crap, because there's no easy answer, and the answers definitely don't lie with people like News Corp getting their way.
Which is, unfortunately, what we've seen in Australia. There's that Wired article, again, does bring up the fact that it is Nine, it is News Corp, it is the bigger players who have entered into these deliberately obfuscated and occluded deals with the platforms for money, and smaller publishers, even the ones who are joining together for collective bargaining, are not getting anywhere near that. So one of the key arguments in favor of a deal like this is, it will help the smaller publishers, it will help regional publishers. People will cite like one or two studies, but for the most part, where is that money going? It's certainly not going to them.
And I think that's their argument. There's a quote here from CEO of a Canadian news site, The Logic. He says it's a necessary evil in order to maintain balance in Canada's media ecosystem. It doesn't maintain balance. It benefits the big players.
I think the more accurate statement in our notes is the one from Paul Deegan, who's president and chief executive of News Media Canada, who says, "This is not a magic bullet. This is a badly needed Band-Aid. It's treating a symptom. It's not treating a symptom. It's hiding a symptom."
No.
So I think the fundamental point this comes down to is that the people making this legislation, whether that's Australia, the UK, the US, wherever else, there are people that have barely figured out email. And until we get people in that understand the internet to try and sort out these issues, we're going to end up in more stupid corners like this. And, you know, the UK is next in this.
That should be a regular Media Voices feature. Stupid corner. That would be genius. This week on Stupid Corner.
Well, we can't give it to Nadine Dorries every week now because she's gone.
That's true. She's gone.
Plenty of candidates take her place, Chris. Don't you worry.
And now on to news in briefs. And Condé Nast has missed its revenue target for the year by less than a single percentage point year on year. Now, that's according to a write-up in the...
Annoying.
I know, yeah, right. Can you see it like ticking up and just not making it? But what I thought was notable here is that it's going big. It's making a lot of noise about its e-commerce revenue strategy. We can actually probably talk about that in Esther's nib as well. But what I thought was kind of interesting is that they're saying advertising revenue was down a lot more than expected. But when Sarah Fisher for Axios reported last August, she pointed out that its digital advertising was actually up 13% and was expected to contribute significantly to their overall revenue. So what's happened there? Is that just a bit of a trim in terms of luxury advertising budget because of Cosy Lives, or is that something more fundamental?
It must be something else, because I'm sure I read something in Press Gazette a couple of weeks ago about the fact that the luxury advertising market has actually remained really strong.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I don't quite know where that's come from.
They're going to just blame. They were going to do exactly what you said. They're going to blame the recession, and I'm making the little bunny ears because we don't know really what that recession is. I think the digital ad market particularly has changed since August. I think that's the forecasts right across the board have shrunk on that one. But again, Esther talks about this a lot. You're still talking about real growth. It might not be 13%, but it's still real growth. Okay, so I apologise for this because I know we're all really bored talking about Twitter's slow motion implosion. But this story from Casey Newton in The Verge really had me start thinking, what the actual is going on? Twitter's Slack system shut down last week. You know, people basically weren't doing anything. They weren't working. Casey Newton describes it as Twitter's equivalent of a snow day. It's like, well, there's no Slack. We can't do anything. So the story came out, it was routine maintenance, which was described as bullshit because there's no such thing as Slack routine maintenance. And then the rumour was that Twitter hadn't paid its bill, which could be true because they haven't paid other bills.
Lots of other bills. I don't think, it would be more notable at this point if they had paid a bill for something since Elon took over.
Well, because they fired everybody who can pay bills, can't they?
So then it turns out that someone just shut it down. Internally, someone shut it off. Possibly because Elmo wanted to see if Twitter could work without it, and if he got his answer pretty quickly. The people that say he is an absolute genius are so deluded.
They've been shown up this year.
He can go in the stupid corner this week.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's just got a permanent place. You know what? We'll always reserve a stool there in that corner. But there was, I read this morning, actually, not to date the episode, but this is Sunday the 26th of February. And as of this morning, apparently, about 50 engineering team members were cut. We were just talking about some faults in the DM system before we started recording. Yeah. The last thing you need to do at this point is cut engineers.
Anyway, he fired a bunch of people last week, didn't he, for the whole Joe Biden tweet thing?
That was brilliant. Yeah. We didn't talk about that, but that is fantastic. Nobody saw my tweets.
I get pissed off though because the president of the United States tweets get more attention than yours got.
That's because everybody's blocked and they're fed up of him. Anyway.
Yesterday he tweeted. So I've gone and I've unblocked a lot of people because I think it's actually really important to hear criticism. Blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, you are just shit scared that everybody's blocking you.
Why is he a Brummie?
That wasn't a Brummie. That wasn't Brummie.
So following the news, I think it was late last year, that Zilla Bing Thorne is departing imminently as CEO of Future. Former BuzzFeed's chief operating officer and Mail executive John Steinberg has been named as the next CEO. He's taking over from Zilla at the start of April. There was some chat in the media voices group about this. And I think we were all a bit like, oh, he's actually based in the US. And I think that sends a really strong signal I'll just leave that as my polite way of phrasing it. It sends quite a strong signal about how seriously Future is taking its growth over the pond. That was quite polite for me. It was politer than I was in the group.
Yeah.
Best of luck, John Steinberg. We'd love to speak to you about your plans.
I was surprised that their CEO is going to be in the States because they've got so many people in the UK. And if I get the growth is in the States, but if you're sat in the UK, are you thinking, what am I, chopped liver?
I'm not.
Talking of media leaders, this week I spoke to Bonnie Kintzer, who is CEO of Trusted Media Brands. So before joining as CEO in 2014, she'd actually already worked with the company under its previous name as the Reader's Digest Association. So I started by asking her what changes she'd seen the brand undergo during that time.
I started working with the brand actually in the early 90s as a consultant, and then joined the company from 98 till about 2007. And then I came back in 2014. So it really does span quite a long time. And yes, I have seen many, many changes.
So, I mean, in that sense, you've almost seen the huge arc from when, I suppose, print magazines were in their heyday right through to, I don't know what you call it now.
Well, it's funny. I think in spite of the many changes, and I'm happy to go through some of them, one of the things I saw from the beginning of working with Reader's Digest was the continued focus on the customer. And that has followed through to today, all of these decades later. And I think that that's why it's such a successful brand. Not that many brands can say that they've celebrated their 100th birthday, but Reader's Digest always had a focus on audience. The audience, of course, back then was all print. I think when I came back to the company in 2014, there was not a full embracing of digital media. The magazine was really the heartbeat of the brand. And they would post one article a day online.
Oh,
and it was stunning to me in 2014 that was going on. And so we started obviously posting quite a lot more. And lo and behold, people loved it. And how interesting it is that actually the small bites of Reader's Digest are exactly what web surfers want. And so our traffic is at an all-time high, and we continue to grow because I think we focus on the right content for the right audience. So that is by far the biggest change in the time that I've worked with the brand.
So, I mean, what part does the magazine play now?
Magazine is very important. It's the fourth largest print magazine in the United States. So it's still very important and valuable to our consumers. We always say you want to meet the consumer where they are. For some consumers, print is a very important part of their life. It's very much a lean back, relax. Sometimes when I read, letters from our readers, I love that they say, what a break from the news, what a break from the stress of life to sit down and read Reader's Digest, right? It's a magazine that celebrates the goodness of life, that reminds you that your neighbors are good people, not talking about politics, not talking about celebrities, but really here to inform and entertain in all sorts of ways.
So apart from posting more than one article a day, what opportunities or wider business did you see to transform it when you agreed to rejoin it in 2014?
So I think what I saw was, and of course we're many brands, right? Taste of Home, Family Handyman, and now FailArmy and the Pet Collective. I think what I saw was a company that really understood its audience and what kind of content that audience wanted, but had not figured out how to monetize it more broadly. And that's really a great opportunity because I used to call us a restartup, right? We were a company that had hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and was profitable. And yet we had to behave like we were a startup because we were entering all new parts of the media landscape. And that's exciting. It's exciting when people know your brand and love your brand. They just haven't seen you in all the different places that they should be able to.
At an organizational level, how do you get people into that startup mindset when the business is definitely not a startup?
Well, it is a lot of communication and a lot of transparency. So I did share a lot of data when I got here and really explaining to people what the opportunity was and where we were winning and where we weren't. And I remember at the beginning feeling like, oh, nobody believes me. And, sort of bit by bit, you have to have your proof points. And I would say Esther probably took about 18 months till all of a sudden, when I would be addressing the company, they would start nodding like, yeah, we're doing this. And I think so much of transforming a company is, laying out a plan, doing what you say, saying what you do, and being honest about what's happening. And I try to practice that today as well. But obviously, 9 years ago, it was a lot more intense.
Yeah. Do you think consistency plays a part in that as well? Because I sort of think of a lot of businesses like BuzzFeed that struggle, and they seem to almost change strategy every 9 months, and you sort of don't know where you are, either an observer or an employee.
I do think consistency is important. People want to know that you have a plan, and even though you do need to pivot on your tactics, if you will, we know that for us, our raison d'etre is to create engaging video and written content to entertain and engage. And we do that. And we do that with all of our brands. Obviously, FailArmy is quite different than a Family Handyman or a Taste of Home, but all of our brands do that. And that is our mission. And so while we might have to shift from Snap to YouTube, it doesn't change what's in our heart and our soul for our audience.
Yeah. How did the pandemic change the business? I mean, in terms of turbulence, that was certainly for a lot of people a very turbulent couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, when the pandemic started, of course, like everybody else, there was that terror of, what does this mean? We ultimately were a big winner in the pandemic. Everyone was cooking. We have Taste of Home. People were not vacationing. They were doing projects around their house. We have Family Handyman. People were paying attention to the birds and the flowers in their backyard. We have Birds and Blooms. And people wanted to feel good about life. And we have Reader's Digest. So we did quite well. At the beginning, our big issues were you couldn't get food in the supermarket, and we couldn't get our employees into the kitchens to cook and photograph. And so we had to, particularly on Taste of Home, had to really re-architect how we were doing recipe testing and photography. And then and our kitchens are in Milwaukee, which is in Wisconsin, in the middle of the United States. When we were able to reopen those offices, we had an A team and a B team so that just in case somebody on the A team got sick, the B team could continue to go into the office and create content. So that was a dramatic shift and stressful. I think for the other brands, we were very lucky that we had, our tech was what we needed it to be to work remotely. And also in our favor, we were never all in the same office. So we've always had multiple offices in the US. So we were already adept at working with people that we weren't physically with.
So what is that all hybrid now? Or a mix
yes,
of all sorts
we're
of things?
all hybrid now. And now, of course, we did a very big acquisition in the middle of COVID, which is something I never imagined one could do. But that was exciting to fall in love with another company without meeting any human beings for a while. And then when me and one of my colleagues and the two principals on the other side, when we got our vaccinations, we met in person and struck a deal. And that was great. So, of course, now we have a very large presence in LA. All of our production studios for our video brands are there. So we're in LA, in Milwaukee, and in New York. So I'm in the New York City office today, and that's great. There's probably about 30, 40 people here, but sometimes there's nobody here. And people are getting their work done. We're trying to get people to come back for, different meetings or collaboration and whatnot. And I think people are really responding to that. As I like to say, come back into the office for a purpose, not just to sit on your video screen from your office. That's not particularly useful.
Yeah, absolutely. For those staff members that are more fully remote, do you ever worry about, I suppose, longer term integration to the company culture, like from a management perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I worry about everything, Esther. So, yeah, I worry. We get very high marks from our staff on onboardings. I think we have a fantastic human resource organization, and whenever we do surveys, I'm stunned um, at the comments that we get back. So we give people a buddy, and we have a lot of materials to help them on board, and we also have a mentoring program. So I think that we have done a really terrific job. I worry about, what don't I know about you? You're a new person. Do you need more help here? Do you know how to ask for help? Do you know who to ask for help? So I think particularly for newer and younger employees, I feel that it's a real lost opportunity to not be physically with other people.
Just switching gear a bit to the brands that TMB is home to. Is this sort of, I suppose, parent of the brands? You've got some very large, well-known brand names. You've already mentioned Reader's Digest and some of the others, and you've also got some much smaller ones. How do you decide what to prioritise and invest in from a leadership perspective?
Well, each brand, really has its own plan, and we look at where the opportunity is. So while you may not have ever heard of FailArmy, it's an extraordinarily large global streaming brand. And if you were a 23-year-old male, you probably would have heard about it. And so we look at, the audiences that it's serving, and just how much more content people are responding to. So I think for the Pet Collective and FailArmy in particular, they're two of the largest streaming brands in the US, and FailArmy very big globally. And so we look to feed those in the ecosystems that they participate in. No different than we would look at a Taste of Home or a Family Handyman or a Reader's Digest. All five of those brands are quite different from one another, and they each have different opportunities. We don't want them to all be the same, but we do want them to serve their audience in the best way possible.
FailArmy, I do actually know. I think I was just in the under 30 age bracket when all that social media algorithms were pushing it. So that one I do know.
I'm happy to know that, Esther. Very happy.
I did know on the on TMB's website, you say you're video first, which is obviously since the Duke acquisition. How are you shaping the business to compete in what is quite a cutthroat and quite an expensive industry?
So the reason why we love Jukin so much is that they have a very different business model. So we have people watching videos 24 hours a day in India, in Romania, and in Los Angeles. And they are looking for the best viral videos, both for sharing as well as for any of our shows, whether it's on streaming or on social. And so they immediately connect with creators. And we've paid out well over $30 million in creator fees, because when we monetize that video, let's say in a licensing opportunity, we share that revenue with the creator. So we have a great reputation. So it's not the same as creating what you call high production value, but it is content that consumers really love. So if you're going to watch FailArmy video for an hour, you're excited to watch the UGC that we're delivering to you.
That relationship with creators is quite interesting, because I feel like that's an area that a lot of other, not necessarily publishers, but certainly accounts and social media platforms have exploited. So it's just quite interesting that you do have that emphasis on licensing and paying them.
Correct, and we always have. It really is the backbone of our video business. While we do create some original content, of course, and Taste of Home and Family Handyman have always created their own content, a big part of the Jukin and the UGC environment is to be working with creators. So we couldn't do it without them, and so it's an important part of the fabric. And like you say, it's not affordable otherwise. So we do want to make money, and that's an important way for us to manage the business smartly.
Yeah. You've got the wider TMB umbrella. How does that sort of strand of all the viral videos and the very much the video first strategy sit alongside more legacy brands like Reader's Digest, which has got that really strong print history. I suppose, do they operate very separately, or can you see them integrating and sharing a lot more in the future?
Yeah, they're all integrated. So we just launched At Home with Family Handyman on streaming. So we're very excited about that. So taking a 70-plus-year-old brand that's very strong in print and very strong in web, and now having this exciting move into streaming. Reader's Digest is doing unbelievably well socially with the clips from the Jukin Library. That's been very exciting to watch. You think about People Are Awesome and Reader's Digest. There's a great kinship. Reader's Digest audience loves pets. So we've seen incredible success on the social side for Reader's Digest. We actually have all of our content and production under one leader in the company. The woman who runs production for all of our video now has responsibility for our test kitchens. So we are absolutely harmonizing the brands so that we don't think about them as this company versus that company. It's really what's the best place. We would never launch a FailArmy magazine, of course, right? So it's really where does the brand belong? What part of the media ecosystem is their audience?
And you've said before in this interview, you focus on where the audiences are, and you've mentioned social media, video quite a lot. Forming strategies for these platforms can be really quite tricky because they change so often. So how do you balance needing to stay on trend, joining platforms like TikTok, with also being at the mercy of the tech giants, because they can turn that dial down as much or as often as they want?
Yeah, I would say two things run through us. One is make sure your content is good. Okay, because even when an algorithm changes, they typically still want to deliver the best content to their people, and we have very, very good content. The other is portfolio diversification. So don't be 100% dependent on TikTok or Facebook. And so we look at that. We look at where our traffic and our monetization is coming from, so that we can have a better sense of like, wow, if this one hits us hard, and is down 10%, well then, okay, we can shift more over here. So for instance, as Snap has delivered much less of a monetization opportunity for us, we've leaned in even further with YouTube. And I think that's where your analytics comes in, and really looking at it and understanding what's happening in the marketplace and having a team that knows how to pivot. And I think people get excited about that empowerment because they're it's people who are working, right? It's our social team that's coming back with the analysis and the recommendation and then making the shift. So I think you have to have both, excellence in content and diversification, because you're 100% right that algorithms change and there's a lot out of your control. So focus on what is in your control and move down that path.
Yeah. Related to that, apart from video, where do you see the biggest opportunities for TNB's brands this year?
Affiliate, we're very, very bullish on affiliate. We're on our June 30th fiscal year, and we're having a great year on the affiliate side. We think there's a tremendous more upside. I mean, this is where having 25, 70, and 100-year-old brands with a lot of authority, really, really matters online. So if Reader's Digest is going to recommend something to you, you're more prone to listen. Our affiliate content comes from our editors, not coming from marketers. So it really is in the belief of the editor that this is a good product or service to recommend to our audience. And I think that Family Handyman, if you think about it, most people would prefer to get a recommendation from a friend a la Family Handyman rather than a retailer. If you're working at Family Handyman, you are actually handy. You're actually in the shop. So we're very bullish about that, and we're very bullish about video monetization. I would say those are our two biggest areas, and we still see growth in our websites and in programmatic.
The last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot from Google and Microsoft's Bing about they're wanting to sort of almost interrupt the user with these AI. If a user is searching for a particular product recommendation, they want to surface that ahead of publisher websites. I suppose, do you see that as a threat, or do you think people are going to come back to the trusted brands in the end rather than whatever the search engine happens to recommend at the top?
I think I was encouraged today. I read something that Microsoft said that they understand that they have to partner with publishers and pay them for their content. I think that it would be abusive, right, for the search, for the chat, the AI bots to write their text using all of our content with no financial attribution. That would definitely hurt all of us. I mean, anyone who creates content. Um, I think we're watching it. I think obviously the tests that have been done so far are not particularly impressive in terms of accuracy. So I think we have to watch, but we are watching, and we think our brands matter. We think our excellence in content creation matters, but you have to pay a lot of attention, when Google and Microsoft are going down a path that could change consumer behavior unless consumers reject it. It could definitely have a major impact on our business.
Yeah. What would your advice be to other publishing leaders perhaps struggling with digital transformation and actually looking to turn their businesses around?
I think, when you want to transform a business, you first need a plan, which really has to start with people and culture. I think when you have the right people in the right places, and if you concentrate on having the right content for the audience, I think anything can be done. But it does take time, and it does take investment, and we did have the investment to do that, but it does pay off. So I always go back to, do you have the right people, and do you have the right content? And I think that really is the path for anybody to transform their business.
Don't forget that the Publisher Podcast Awards shortlist is live at publisherpodcastawards.com, and tickets are now on sale. We've seen an ecstatic response from the shortlisted entries. It is a fantastic catalogue of podcasts this year, and the judges, I'm sure, are going to have just as much fun listening to them as we did shortlisting them.
2 months to go.
I know.
And the Publisher Newsletter Awards will be opening this week on Wednesday, 1st of March. They will be open for entries, and the forms will be available from publishernewsletters.com. That's publishernewsletters.com.
But until next week, when we can come back and give you an update on how those entries are going, please do share the podcast as wide as you can. Don't forget to sign up to our newsletter at voices.media. But until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.